Number 10. Hulk. Bruce Banner is still the Hulk in this reality, but instead of being in the wrong place at the wrong time and ending up being exposed to gamma radiation, which would transform him into the Hulk against his will, he was a researcher working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and with the Ultimates to try and rediscover the super soldier serum. Yeah, in the Ultimates, much like in the MCU, everything is kinda connected by this one single thread, this one purpose, the super soldier serum. Bruce would believe he had uncovered the serum and decided against S.H.I.E.L.D.'s better judgment to test it on himself. This would turn him into the monster we'd come to know as the Hulk, but only when Bruce was using the serum. He could not change at will, and his transformation was not initially triggered by intense emotions or rage. However, he would then blend the actual super soldier serum formula extracted from the blood of the revived Captain America, Stephen Rogers, with the Hulk serum, which would end up resulting in his transformations becoming a permanent aspect of his DNA. Number 9. Elektra. While still super heroically fanciful, Elektra's backstory in the 1610 universe is just a touch more grounded than her 616 counterpart. Instead of her mother being murdered and dying a very violent death, she instead died of breast cancer. Elektra was not made to train in martial arts when she was young, but rather enjoyed martial arts, and so she trained in martial arts out of her own interest, with Bruce Lee acting as an inspiration for her, as a fan of his. She ended up becoming a villain all because of a fellow university student who was a jerk, the wealthy Calvin Langstrom, who tormented her at school because she was willing to stand up to him and defend others against him. Because of this, he made Elektra's life a living hell, attacking one of her friends and even hiring thugs to burn down her father's laundromat business as well as her family home. It was because of this that Elektra turned to the dark side. Frustrated that there was no justice for her or any of Langstrom's victims, no matter the crime that he committed due to his wealth and his connections, she ended up attempting to kill him, setting off on a darker path than her fellow friend and vigilante, Daredevil. At one point she's like, "Daredevil, you coming with me or are you gonna help this Langstrom guy?" And he's like, "I'm gonna help this guy?" I was like, dude, just go with Elektra. Elektra's on like she's bad, but she's trying to be good, you know what I mean? I don't know, I love bad girls. I'm like, she bad, but she good. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you love this list as much as I loved writing it for you, please be sure to show us some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Also give it a thumbs up because I want to tell you more origins. And so if you give it a thumbs up, there's a better chance that'll happen. Number 8. Hawkeye. Hawkeye is actually a lot more mysterious in the Ultimate Universe than the version we have from the main continuity comics. It's even been implied before that Clint Barton might not actually be Hawkeye's true name, but even an alias from the name he was given at birth. So mysterious. Instead of being someone who picked up his skills from swordsmen around the carnival circuit, Hawkeye was a former Olympic archer turned Black Ops agent who worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. The Earth 1610 story from Hawkeye more mirrors his MCU story, where he ends up settling down and having a family, but tragically in the Ultimate Universe, when the Ultimates are betrayed by fellow member Black Widow, Hawkeye's family is killed and he is kidnapped, tormented, and interrogated by Natasha's true allies. Don't worry though, he manages to escape. Thank goodness. With only his fingernails as weapons. That's how you know you're cool, if you can just fight with fingernails. I don't think I could ever do that, although mine are pretty sharp, so maybe. Number 7. Bucky Barnes. As opposed to being the camp's mascot like he was in the golden age of Marvel Comics, Bucky here was a young friend of Steve's who joined him on his journey in the military working as a press photographer. Makes sense. Bucky would not go missing before Steve, or actually go missing at all. Instead, it would be Steve who went MIA and was presumed dead, and Bucky who had to live with this and move on. Bucky Barnes would not become the Winter Soldier, but instead would live a relatively normal life, returning home and bonding with Roger's fiancée Gale. In fact, the two grew so close that they ended up in a romantic relationship, and Buck would marry Gale instead. By the time Steve returns from the ice, Barnes is now an old man. I like this reality where like Bucky just gets to grow up and like have a normal life. It's pretty cool. Number 6. Black Widow. In the reality of Earth 1610, Black Widow never truly reformed, but instead was a spy and villain the whole time. Gasp. It turned out that she was a double agent who was only pretending to serve the interests of the United States. While posing as one of their heroes, she was actually still loyal to Russia and the antagonistic team known as the Liberators, of which she was also secretly a member. Shh, don't tell anyone. Her goal was to destroy the Ultimates, and after winning over their trust and even becoming engaged to Iron Man, she betrayed the Ultimates and turned on them, revealing her true colors. Of course, She may have revealed those true colors a little too soon, as Iron Man easily apprehended her and turned her over to the authorities, but not before she could kill his butler Jarvis in cold blood. R.I.P. Jarvis. Number 5. Spider-Man. While Peter Parker's story was not too different from his 616 counterpart, he wouldn't end up being the only Spider-Man in the Earth of 1610, and in fact Peter would eventually leave the mantle, passing it on to someone in his place. Someone new and very different from our Earth 616 Spidey. Yep, we are talking about the beloved Miles Morales. Miles was introduced in the Ultimate Universe and became such a fan favorite that he ended up moving over to Earth 616. Even after the Ultimate line was ended. Miles' backstory was that he was a teenage kid who was bit by a genetically enhanced spider exposed to the Oz formula while he was visiting his criminal uncle Aaron Davis. Miles was your average, awkward, but lovable hero who happened to be a teenager caught in the middle somewhat of family drama, with his uncle being a criminal and his dad Jefferson drawn into crime alongside his brother Aaron, who ended up working in secret as Fury's eyes and ears in the criminal world, but then later decided to leave it all behind and become a police officer instead. Number 4. Valkyrie. Valkyrie had a very different story than our 616 counterpart. Instead of being an Asgardian inhabiting the body of Barbara Norris, who we know as Brunhilde, she was just Barbara Norris, a 19-year-old girl who was basically obsessed with superheroes, but who had no powers of her own. She was a big Thor fan, and so she kinda decided to imitate his look, dressing up like a scantily clad, sort of Norse goddess or warrior. Barbara did have some skills as a martial artist in training, but was not nearly as experienced as she claimed to be. She wouldn't receive powers until Loki tricked her and her team, the Defenders, into pledging loyalty to him in exchange for said powers. They did not know that Loki was Loki at the time. Valkyrie's gifted powers would grant her superhuman strength, durability, and would allow her to fly. Number 3. Iron Man. Iron Man's initial backstory, which got retconned into just being basically a weird anime show, was a lot different than his 616 counterpart. I know that technically this is no longer canon in terms of his backstory within the 1610 universe, as instead his initial origins was moved over to Earth 55921, but before that happened, before it was retconned away, it was canon in the 1610 universe, and I like to remind everyone of just how gloriously bizarre it was. So here we go. Orson Scott Card was the writer behind the series, a sci-fi writer who you might recognize the name of, as he is the author of many other acclaimed science fiction works such as Ender's Game, which if you are like me, you read Ender's Game in school and you were like, this book's actually pretty good. I don't know if that's what happened to you, but that was my story. I feel like that's actually maybe why I like sci-fi today. That might have been the beginning. Maybe. That and Stargate. The Ultimate Iron Man series, however, ended up being a little too out there for comic book fans in terms of what it offered when it came to shaking up Tony's origins. Shook it up a little too much. Tony here was a child who was altered while in his mother's womb by a lab accident. He ended up being born with neural tissue all over him, which made him extremely sensitive to the world around him, but also made him hyper intelligent. His father Howard would create a liquid suit to protect his son from the world he was so sensitive to, but this suit would have its drawbacks and would also make Tony appear blue. So there you go. Number 2. Nick Fury. Nick Fury was changed quite a bit in the Ultimate Universe. This is 616 Nick Fury, a former World War II soldier turned super spy whose life was saved by the Infinity Formula. This is 1610 Nick Fury, a former World War II soldier who worked alongside Wilson Fisk's grandfather and Wolverine at the time, but who was taken in by the US military and forcibly experimented on as part of Project Rebirth. In fact, this version of Nick Fury from the Ultimate Universe has an origin story that kind of echoes that of Isaiah Bradley of Earth 616, one of the first super soldiers. In fact, I believe his origins came out only a few years prior to this Origins, which was added in sort of later. 2008 we got it for Nick Fury, and I think for Isaiah we got it like, I want to say 2003? 1610 Nick Fury would be altered by the serum he was given, which of course was the super soldier serum, but he would use his enhanced strength and abilities to help his fellow prisoners escape. This version of Fury was also modeled after Samuel L. Jackson, who would later end up being promised a part in potential future films, in order to help make amends after Jackson noticed that Marvel had basically used his likeness in the Ultimate Universe without asking him first. But don't worry, it all worked out. No one got really mad, I don't think, about it, so yay. Number 1. Black Knight. Dane Whitman has such a random story in the Ultimate Universe. In the main continuity, he is a more medieval feeling hero who fights with an ancient cursed sword that causes him to kinda lose sanity and become more rabid almost each time he uses it. In the Ultimate Universe, he became more machine than man. Originally, he was a man who served in the military but became a quadriplegic after saving his fellow soldiers in battle. He would then become more of a mech with a human mind, but was considered too insane to actually be used for the team that he'd been recruited on, the West Coast Ultimates. As a result, he spent much of his life inside a stasis tube until he was intended to be used as a weapon against the Ultimates during the events of Earth's 1610 Civil War story. Such a random story. What does this have to do with Black Knight at all? From 616, I don't know.
Number 10. Origins. Why not start at the beginning? Let's do it. Ultimate James Howlett first appeared in Ultimate X-Men issue 1 back in 2001. Now his combat days began as a paratrooper for the Canadian Army during World War II. He was part of the invasion of Sicily, and funny enough, that's actually where he met Private Nick Fury and Private Fisk. Now Fisk got hit by a bullet, and then the three of them were all taken away. They were captured, even though James was from a different unit. He was from Canada. He just got roped into it. So that's where they all got put into the Weapon X complex and were under experimentation by Dr. Abraham Cornelius. Now luckily, James got out of there. The other two though, they were tested on to become this new Captain America. They were the test subjects of the new serum. But if you want to hear more of that Ultimate side, check out one of our playlists. We explain quite a bit of it. So yeah, in the Ultimates, Nick Fury is a super soldier. How cool is that? But Wolverine got out of there. He didn't want to be part of it. Well, he kind of got out of there. He got really, really close until a stray bullet hit him last second, and then everybody was in shock as he healed himself. So they dragged him right back in and they're like, well, we gotta do some tests. What's going on here? So we got this mutant ability down the road, whereas main Wolverine was just born a mutant. So key difference right there. Number 9. Mutant Zero. So Dr. Cornelius was super into this guy, and then during these experiments, because obviously they wanted to pick him apart and see what the hell just happened, during these experiments they discovered this gene that when it's activated gives you superpowers, basically. So he came up with the term for them. He called them mutants, which is a great word, gotta admit. And James Howlett was mutant number 1. Well, actually, mutant 0 was his term. Now the genome was spread around the planet over time, causing a few more mutants to pop around, just a few of them. And also those scientists who like to experiment on James and others, they got what was coming eventually, because a mutant boy down the road had some Weapon X scientists as parents, and when he found out how they were treating James and others, well, he took out both of his parents and set James free. Yeah, that little boy was Magneto. The Ultimates are sick. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be really helpful for us. Or if you're feeling good today, maybe you want to hit that subscribe button. I mean, no pressure, but it's right there. Thank you so much. Let's get right back to the video. Number 8, Weapon X. So yeah, that whole thing with Eric was a big deal, but Wolverine was actually recaptured later on, this time by Colonel John Wraith, who was not fond of mutants at this point. There were a few of them and he was like, okay, this has gotten out of hand. And at this point, John was also the new head of the Weapon X program. So they wiped Wolverine's memory and gave him the name Logan. And this is where things got real for James, more real than before. This is when he was tortured. The other guy who was there, who was also getting tortured, his name was Victor Creed. And Victor was getting on his nerves the whole time. And this was when the Adamantium was bonded to Logan's skeleton. So a lot of things happened during this time as well at Weapon X. So he was a mindless brute, and things took a turn one mission when he was deployed in the desert during the Gulf War. The truck got ambushed and Wolverine was let loose. This insane, mindless mutant weapon. No big deal at all. So he wiped out everybody. He took out every single member except for one guy, Nick Fury. He didn't take him out, he saved his life and carried him all the way to base because part of him still remembered meeting him early on in his life. Nick Fury actually recognized him as well and then came back later to set him free. What goes around comes around. Number 7. Brotherhood of Mutant Supremacy. So Magneto, of course, becomes an evil ruler in this universe as well, and he and Charles once shared a dream about creating a safe haven for mutants called the Savage Land. But a few arguments later and a pole in the spine, and now Charles is in a wheelchair, they're not talking anymore. So now Magneto is full-on villain and he creates this Brotherhood of Mutant Supremacy, and his first idea was to recruit Wolverine and attack the Pentagon. And that Savage Land ends up becoming the new evil headquarters, not a paradise. So Magneto wanted to take out Charles for good this time, not just paralyze him. He wanted him gone, so he sent Wolverine to get the job done. So Wolverine was undercover the entire time. Quicksilver actually almost blew it at one point, but Wolverine came through and impressed the X-Men. Number 6, joining the X-Men. So while he was in deep cover, Wolverine sparked up a romance with Jean Grey. Now he wanted to seal the deal, really make it look believable, so he went on with this fake romance. Thing is, Wolverine actually fell in love with her. Oops. Now Scott, aka Cyclops, was a little upset during this, and Magneto actually wanted Scott to be with Wanda. But Scott had other ideas. But Scott was actually undercover as well, so he was on the bad team and then Wolverine was on the good team. It was basically The Departed, but superheroes instead. The Jean and Wolverine affair gave Scott a reason to go and talk shop with Magneto. So he went in and then found out this plan, which was to wipe out Washington with Sentinels, and then the X-Men intervened and saved the president, who was naked at this time, because sure. And this is when Wolverine fully becomes an X-Men. He attacks Magneto, with Quicksilver even removing Magneto's helmet to make it easier for him. So everybody came around and joined the good team, which is great. And then a page later, Wolverine is now in his new, much cozier home. And their first mission as a new X-Men team with Wolverine was to head back to Weapon X as a team to get some answers. Number 5, jealousy. Now this Wolverine gets pretty jealous as well. He takes things to a new height when he discovers that Jean Grey truly loves Cyclops. So Logan now wasn't a fan of Cyclops. There was this deep rift growing between them. So Charles was like, hey guys, why don't you both go to Savage Land together and work it out? As dudes, couple dudes working it out. You can talk, throw rocks, whatever. They did not work it out. They got into a huge fight. And what happened really was Wolverine let Cyclops fall to his death in order to get Jean back. Cyclops survived because, of course he did. And he exposed Wolverine to the crew, but Cyclops didn't blast him with his visions. No, he just blasted him with words. So he let Wolverine stay on the team, and this whole time Wolverine just sat and felt guilt. He was like, damn, maybe I am not a good friend after all. Interesting. He started to become a leader and he let his past self die. He became a role model for the younger X-Men like Rogue. And then he ended up becoming pretty good friends with Cyclops, even though, he threw him off a cliff and all. Number 4, Sabretooth. So yeah, maybe you're wondering what ended up happening with that other insane guy, Victor. Well, when the team first went back to Weapon X, they came across Wraith and Sabretooth. Now, Sabretooth did one of the worst things ever at this point. He burned the files on Wolverine, literally just destroying his past right in front of him. And this leads them to their first violent conflict. They go back and forth, throwing each other into trees, and Sabretooth thinks that he's got him at one point. He's got him underwater, so he's holding Wolverine's head underwater, and he's questioning how exactly a healing factor will fix a suffocated brain, which is a great question. He's like, oh yeah, you hear that popping in your nose? That's your brain cells exploding. Now, it's cool, except Wolverine's underwater this whole time. You probably didn't hear any of this monologue, but it's still cool. But Wolverine's got that healing factor, which is probably stronger than we think. Number 3, healing factor. Ultimate Wolverine has been known to have a weaker healing factor than our 616 Wolverine, but it's kind of his main thing. I mean, Ultimate Wolverine can regenerate his body tissue so well that at one point, believe it or not, Wolverine was stuck under an iceberg, and the only way he survived was to bank on that healing factor, and he ate himself. The dude ate his arms, like he ate his body. It's like 127 hours, only, he's fine. He just has to eat good. He ate strips of his own arm because he had to. I mean, he can grow it back, so it's not too horrible. No, that's still pretty horrible, actually, now that I think of it. Superheroes are wild because this opens up the meat dimension theory, which is just a blast. If you haven't heard of it, I strongly recommend you Google it after this. All this regeneration, where does the meat come from? Where does it go? Can he eat forever? What's going on? Question for you guys, if you could regenerate your cells and you were stuck, would you do it? Would you eat yourself? Let us know in the comments. That's a weird thing. Let us know in the comments though. I'm still curious. Number 2, adaptable. In Ultimate Wolverine vs. Hulk, it was said that Wolverine's power might be the survival ability. It's like his main thing. Because at one point his head gets clean off his body. It's just taken off, but he's still alive. And Nick Fury makes a good point here. He's like, well, if it was a healing factor, he would still be dead right about now, because it's just his head. It still doesn't make any sense. But Ultimate Wolverine's head was alive and well. Now, without his lungs, he should not be able to breathe, but he adapted and started breathing through his skin. So he's adaptable in the most ultimate way. Number 1, combat. So the way he's able to fight off Sabretooth after being held underwater is just by going right in between the legs. He fights dirty, claws are out, he's doing what he has to be done. Wolverine says, hey, at least I have enough brain cells left to cover my family jewels in a fight. And I gotta tell you, that's a great call. Also, that's a great sentence to say right before you toss somebody off a cliff. This guy loves tossing people off cliffs, eh? Wow. So the Ultimate combat is a bit more dirty, a little more rough than his 616 counterpart, I'd say. But that's because he kind of has to be, because his healing factor isn't as strong as a 616, and even his adamantium skeleton is not that helpful. Adamantium is weaker in the Ultimate universe, fun fact. But even so, one time Magneto ripped his skeleton out of his skin and Wolverine had to regrow his entire body back. That's the most painful thing I can imagine. I still don't want that to happen, healing or not. I would fight dirty even if my bones were made of adamantium and even if my skin still came back out of nowhere. Because pain is still pain, and I don't want any of that pain. No, no siree.
Number 10, Perma Gray. Or, well, mostly. Hulk would appear to be green a few times in the comics, but for the most part, he was always gray here. Apparently, he was green a few times for some reason that was, it was never really deeply delved into. It only happened once or twice in the universe, but it would later be established that gray was supposed to be the Hulk's coloring. I feel like they made him gray to denote a sort of shift in this Hulk's mentality and persona from 616's, and also to make him even more different in appearance than his 616 counterpart, as 616 Hulk is more often than not green, though he has also been gray from time to time. Super Soldier Serum. Bruce Banner was one of the scientists tasked with attempting to recreate the Super Soldier formula. Worried the credit would be kept from him, but also believing he had actually managed to recreate the serum, he decided to test it on himself. The result was that he was transformed into the beast that we come to know as the Hulk. So he didn't quite nail it. But he did manage to create a serum that would make a person unstoppably strong. However, because of the fact that he was now part man, part monster, he would end up being apprehended and even arrested by S.H.I.E.L.D. Although at least he wasn't fully part monster yet. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about the Ultimate Universe, be sure to show us some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Hulk Serum. Ultimate Hulk would also require the Hulk Serum to even be able to transform. In fact, this at one point is used as an offhand explanation for why he has been occasionally green in appearance in the comics. It apparently had something to do with those batches of serum that Bruce Banner was using to transform, and that's like what made him green. I don't know, I guess he put some green dye in there or something. And in order for Banner to become Hulk at all, he would need the serum, which of course sometimes turned him green, but mostly still turned him gray. He would need the serum for the transformation, that is, until he mixed together the Hulk serum with the Super Soldier Serum, which S.H.I.E.L.D. now had after uncovering Steve Rogers and extracting it from his blood. Consuming a version of those two serums blended together meant that Bruce Banner's DNA was permanently altered, meaning that he would no longer need the serum to Hulk out in the future, which was maybe not great for him. Number 7, Times Square Massacre. Bruce Banner combining the serums together would not only alter his DNA, but result in a massacre that he would be held responsible for. The Ultimates had been getting bad press lately, and Bruce saw an opportunity to help the team out as a fellow ally and scientific, though not field-oriented team member. Only S.H.I.E.L.D. knew his secret that he was both Bruce Banner and the monster known as the Hulk, so he decided to unleash the Hulk on the world to give the Ultimates a villain that they could beat. However, this ended up being a not great plan. Bruce was also jealous of Freddie Prinze Jr. at the time, who was currently out on a date with his then ex, Betty Ross, and also in his Hulk form ended up unleashing that frustration. So enacting his plan here resulted in the death of hundreds of people. Later, when his secret was leaked and the world found out who the Hulk, or should I say who Bruce really was, S.H.I.E.L.D. had no choice but to put him on trial for his crimes. He was actually found guilty and sentenced to death, which they intended to follow through with by dropping a nuclear bomb on Banner. Transforming into the Hulk, however, would prevent Banner from dying there, and both he and Hulk would thereby survive that death sentence. Number 6, Assassination Attempts. While their attempt at killing Bruce Banner failed initially, it wouldn't be the last time that S.H.I.E.L.D. would try to take out the Hulk. Later on, Nick Fury would send Wolverine to hunt down Hulk. Fortunately, Wolverine would end up deciding against killing the Hulk, but it wouldn't matter anyways, as S.H.I.E.L.D. found a new way to control the Beast, finding something more useful to hold over his head so they could have better control over him, thereby no longer needing to kill him. Number 5, Ultimates. Banner would continue to work for S.H.I.E.L.D., but would also kind of become their hostage in a way. He would eventually end up joining the Ultimates, but was also used as a weapon by S.H.I.E.L.D., who would often often unleash the Hulk on their enemies. All while this was going on, Banner attempted to get better control over the monster within him, but would also attempt and succeed in escaping from S.H.I.E.L.D. on a few occasions. At one point, they held Betty Ross, whom he loved, hostage in an attempt to control him. That's what I was talking about in the last point. Hulk was never really a willing member of the Ultimates, to be clear, but instead was made to be an ally of theirs against his will, whereas Bruce Banner was like an ally of the Ultimates initially because he was a scientist, until he had this whole Hulk thing going on. And like I said, not only was Hulk used as an unwilling ally of the Ultimates, but S.H.I.E.L.D. would also use him as a direct weapon, putting him in a pod and shooting him out like a missile in the direction of their enemies. Number 4, Adamantium. Adamantium is Hulk's weakness, except when it's not. Adamantium is one of the few materials strong and sharp enough to break Ultimate Hulk's skin, but it doesn't always succeed in hurting him. The Hulk, like in 616, can become stronger the more angry he gets, so we have seen instances in the Ultimate Universe where he was simply too mad to actually be able to get harmed with adamantium. At one point they try to puncture his skin with an adamantium needle, but Hulk's skin is so tough at that time because of how furious he is that he just breaks it. Number 3, killed Spider-Man's parents? Spider-Man's parents were killed by the Hulk? No, not really. But it was definitely made to seem that way in Ultimate Origins. In issue number 4, we see Bruce as the Hulk losing control and destroying his lab. This is implied to be his first transformation and taste of that loss of control. Richard Parker also happened to be working in the lab that day. His wife Mary came to pick him up with their infant son Peter in tow. I guess she couldn't get a sitter or something like that. Richard, in fact, is in the lab when it explodes and comes crashing down around him, and we see Mary get struck by a steel beam as it flies out from the explosion. It seems to be heavily implied that the two of them die here, although that completely contradicts everything that has already been established about their deaths and about Peter's childhood, which we know from Ultimate Spider-Man. And I think, oddly enough, I think this issue is Bendis, and I believe all of that is also Bendis, so I don't know what's happening here. It's like Bendis contradicting himself. Now, for this whole event to have actually happened with the Parkers, it's more likely that they were just very badly wounded in this explosion, despite the fact that it looks like they are both quite dead here. It's actually little Peter who manages to reverse the transformation, helping Hulk to calm down and turn back into Bruce here, only for him to get beaten down by Nick Fury, who is evidently none too pleased with his lead scientist. He's like, what did you do? Don't do that. Now we're going to basically hold you as our prisoner. Number 2, Dark Ultimates. While Hulk has also worked alongside the Ultimates in the past, he also has no real allegiance to the team, especially considering he was often made to join the fray against his will. So it wasn't surprising that when the Maker, aka Ultimate Reed Richards, offered the Hulk a place on his more sinister Dark Ultimates team, that the Hulk readily accepted that. Reed was hoping that the team would help him to win in a final standoff against the Ultimates. Little did any of them know that there was an even greater threat looming that was even bigger than either side could have imagined. A threat that would successfully wipe out their entire universe of Earth 1610. At least temporarily. Number 1, First Hulk. Bruce Banner might be acknowledged as the Hulk even in the Ultimate Universe, but on Earth 1610, he was not the first person to become the Hulk. The first Hulk in the Ultimate Universe was actually Tyrone Cash, aka Leonard Williams. Williams was a professor and scientist who had actually been a mentor to Bruce Banner. He had his own motives for working to create the serum that would turn him into the Hulk, and actually took it before Banner did. Cash would use his brilliant mind to avoid capture for years, and would also operate as a criminal during that time. But eventually he would be apprehended and would end up joining the Ultimate Avengers team, which in this reality is a team more comparable to DC's Suicide Squad than the Avengers of Earth 616. You can check out Tyrone Cash in Ultimate Avengers 2, which is the name of a series, not like issue 2. Just to be clear, there's a lot of numbers in Ultimates. Number 10, Blackheath. Blackheath is Samuel Smithers. Yep, in the reality of 1610, Plant-Man is instead a mutant. His powers are similar to that of Poison Ivy, allowing him to control plant life. Blackheath was one of the mutants who was kept in William Stryker's camps. While there, he ended up meeting and befriending Storm, and would be one of the few mutants left when Utopia came about. Number 9, Mach 2. Mach 2 is Nomi Bloom. She is kind of like the second coming of Magneto, but not as much of a villain. Or at least, she comes around in the end. And not inherently as powerful powerful as Magneto was. She can basically affect and control magnetic fields. Later on, she would see a power boost, which would enable her to have more control over objects containing metal. Mach 2 is also known for being a rival to Kitty in terms of her leadership over the surviving mutants of Utopia. People are going to be like, what is Utopia? And I'm going to be like, don't worry. We're getting to that much later, but it's coming. It's slowly you'll get little bits of information. Number 8, Zorn. In the reality of Earth 1610, Zorn is actually Zorn, but is not the only version of Zorn. Wow, that sounded confusing. What I mean to say is that Zorn is his own person, Kuan Yin, but has a sibling who's also named Zorn, but with a Z. They were each given their powers as part of the Southeast Asian Republic's Super Soldier program. Zorn with an X is the one who you typically see clad in the color white. He is an amazingly powerful telepath and telekinetic. While both characters may have been introduced later and have been somewhat short-lived, they are both presented as being pretty powerful during their time in the comics. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 7, Zorn. This is the sibling I was telling you about. Zorn with a Z or a Z is Shen Yin, the brother of Zorn with an X. His powers are much darker in nature. It's actually believed in the comics that Zorn and Zorn were sort of destined to bring a sense of balance to the world and mutant kind, symbolically sort of representing yin and yang, black and white. Zorn's powers are basically akin to a black hole. He emits a black hole energy and can use his powers to manipulate gravity. In the end, Zorn sacrifices himself when he realizes that he cannot win in the war against the children of tomorrow. In his death, he effectively becomes a black hole in retaliation. Number 6, Colossus. A strong mutant on Earth 616 and in 1610. Initially, Pyotr Rasputin did not possess super strength as part of his power set, but was given a drug called Banshee to enhance his strength, as well as a job working for the Russian mafia. Eventually, he ended up joining the X-Men, though he would leave the team on a few separate occasions. He'd managed to hold off Scarlet Witch, save a submarine that not even the Ultimates were capable of saving, and defeat Proteus, David Xavier, Xavier's son, who threatened the entire world with violence, traveling around and targeting international landmarks the world over. Differences between Colossus of Earth 1610 and that of Earth 616 is that here he isn't inherently strong, as I said before, in his steel form, but needs Banshee to give him that boost. And he's also gay. He even for a time dates fellow mutant Northstar. Number 5, Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine. He also inherited his claws, superior senses, and regenerative healing factor. Like his dad, it's believed that his powers may actually be based in survival as opposed to just healing, with James being seen as adapting to survive injury or harsh environments as needed. Unlike Wolverine, Jimmy can choose to coat his claws in metal, as this is actually part of his power set, and it's believed that only his claws end up being coated, not the rest of his skeleton. Jimmy was a crucial member of the mutant resistance, which fought against Sentinel and militia attacks that threatened to wipe out the mutants. In the end, the mutants were victorious and were given a choice of going to live on their own piece of land in Utah or taking a cure for their mutation. Jimmy was one of the few mutants who decided to keep his powers. Number 4, Storm. Initially in the Ultimate Universe, Storm didn't have great control over her powers, and mostly got by stealing cars, but after the X-Men took her in, she learned how to control and even master her powers, allowing her to become one of the most fearsome and powerful mutants around. Ultimate Storm is so cool. Storm is so fast, she has been shown to be able to catch people who are falling in midair, dodge bullets, and even keep pace with a plane. Impressive considering planes on average travel at speeds over 540 miles per hour or over 870 kilometers per hour. That's fast. She's also likely not someone you want to tangle with, as even when she takes hits in battles, she tends to keep fighting or instinctively strike back. Using her lightning storm and weather control powers, she's also managed to defeat multiple opponents with one single attack, whether they be Sentinel opponents or human opponents, and in some cases, even killing them. I think at one point she kills like 11 people at once, and it's just like, okay. Don't mess with Storm. Got it. I mean, I already knew that before from Earth 616, but now I really know. Number 3, Jean Grey. In Ultimates, it almost seems there is nothing Jean can't do. Before she joined the X-Men, she was in a mental institution as the manifestation of her powers made her seem insane. However, Professor X would save Jean and recruit her on his X-Men team, with her being the second member. In the Ultimate Universe, we have seen Jean become possessed by what she thought was a cosmic entity referred to as the Phoenix God, and almost lose control and her sanity. The biggest problem with Jean is similar to that of her Earth 616 counterpart. Immense power threatens to basically break her mind, or at least take over her sense of sanity. In the comics, Jean is not only a skilled telepath, and was even able to read Wolverine's mind, something Professor X believed wasn't even possible. But she also happens to, weirdly enough, be a skilled doctor and surgeon as well. Although, I'm pretty sure she doesn't have any medical license. Say what? Jean was even shown to be capable of connecting and tapping into the multiverse to reach out and see various versions of herself. Basically, she can do everything, because being a telepath is crazy powerful. Number 2, Magneto. Obviously, one of the most powerful mutants out there has to be Magneto, not just for the powers of magnetism that he wields, but also just for his influence. Magneto was the mastermind behind Ultimatum. I suppose I should use the term mastermind lightly there, as Ultimatum in general is not really seen very favorably in most fans' eyes. I admit it was controversial and caused a lot of perhaps needless death. In fact, I would say it was needless death. But you have to acknowledge just how much of a threat it painted Magneto out to be. While I'm not sure about Magneto basically committing genocide as a victim of one himself, you have to admit that this made him one of the most fearsome characters in all of the Ultimate Universe. And for Magneto, there is power in fear, even though oddly enough, it is usually fear that tends to power the hate that he often stands up against. Number 1, Kitty Pryde. One of the most powerful characters as a leader especially. She ends up becoming the ruler of the mutant tent nation that the mutants dub Utopia. This is a portion of land in Utah that the mutants who choose not to accept the cure are given. In fact, all those who refuse to take the cure are forced to live there. Kitty ends up fighting a war against Jean Grey in the Ultimate Universe as well, because Jean wants Kitty to join the mutant nation that she was put in charge of ruling after the death of Zorn with an X, Xian. But Kitty refuses to bring their people together. Kitty is such a good leader, she even steps down from her title as the leader of Utopia to help ease the target on her own people's backs because of her and Jean's conflict. Kitty and Utopia would end up winning that war, and Kitty would also play a crucial role in defeating Galactus as well. Also, I gotta say, that whole World War X thing, it was pretty weird. It was pretty weird, friends.
Number 10, his origins. Of course, we have to start at the beginning. Ultimate Loki entered the chat in Ultimates 2, issue 1. He is the son of Odin and Farbadi. He was born basically as a peace settlement between Asgard and Jotunheim. So Loki, half-brother Thor, and Balder were the original Warriors 3 here. So Loki would battle these frost giants, they fought in the 1,000-year war, and finally the Asgardians were deemed the victors. So the 3 of them now entered this tournament with other Asgardian warriors, and that's where he was defeated by his brother Thor for the first time. Number 9, a message. So while the brothers were fighting, Loki was warning Thor at the same time. You know, the usual monologue while we're fighting. Now, as the battles begin, Loki strikes Thor, and Thor gets a little excited. He's like, oh, that's how we're gonna be, brother, let's do it. Whatever, you know, they sound like. I'm not man enough to do the He's like, okay, that's how it's gonna be, I see, let's do it. So while they're fighting, Loki begins to warn Thor of what's gonna come after their victories. He tells Thor that they're getting ready to enter very dangerous times, and Thor is confused. He's like, I'm sorry, I thought we just beat everybody. That's why we're celebrating, no? And that's the whole point of this. It's over, we won. Now Loki agrees, but in doing so, this victory, it ended a stalemate that existed for 1,000 years. Now during war, they know who they were. Now that it's over, now what? Who are these guys? What do they have to do now? Now everything changes. Balder comes in after beating those other guys, and he and Thor kept battling, both pretty much ignoring Loki and his warning. Classic. Thor pulls his hammer out to light the place up whilst presenting the victor of the battle, Balder. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It's really helpful for us on our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you for your support. Let's get right back to this video. Number 8, he killed Balder. Spoiler warning, let's do it now while we're at it. So the Warriors 3, they didn't last long after this, because when Loki went to go visit his mother, who was now a prisoner of Odin, she asked him for a favor. She asked Loki to bring her the Norn stones, which contains Odin's power, much like the hammer. So while Loki was stealing those stones, bones, he had to do something pretty dark and terrible. He fired an arrow through the helmet of Heimdall, and yes, the helmet was on his head. So just like that, bam, it was one shot, perfect aim, he nailed it. His favorite bow too, might I add. So Loki also had to take out his other half-brother Balder with his favorite bow. He just loves the bow thing, it's crazy. And that's of course when he was banished from Asgard, which makes sense. He should have been banished a little sooner, but that's fine. Better late than never. So while he was talking to Balder, he made him use his gifts and tell Loki what the future holds. Now Balder responds with, okay, Asgard is in ruins, your mother is dead for her betrayal, and you, Loki, you believe in nothing and you are lost. All salt and no spirit. Burn, that's a roast. There is no tomorrow with his chaos. And then Loki asks what Balder sees in his future before releasing that fateful arrow. Number 7, Baron Zemo. In 1939, supervillain Baron Zemo rose to take over Asgard. Well, it wasn't actually Baron Zemo, it was the Lord of Mischief himself, which you probably could have guessed. He planned an attack on Asgard and his backup was quite intimidating. He had German soldiers and frost giants ready to fight all under his command. Now after a quick Heimdall cocktail, all of these soldiers and giants were just amped up. The Norn stones mixed with Heimdall's blood, yup, it just empowered them. And just as he told Thor, trouble is indeed on its way. Chaos ensued, but luckily Odin stepped in and banished Loki to one of the worst rooms ever. The room without doors. How do we get out? How do we get in? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So Loki apologizes before he disappears, and he says he's sorry. Sorry for nothing, that is. Oh, had him in the first half. You thought. Number 6, Ragnarok. So Loki was sent to the room without doors, but the gang wasn't out of the woods yet. We still have to deal with the giant army, duh. So Odin was then attacked by the leader of the frost giants, Mammon, and once Thor took care of that, he went to check in on his father, and as he was fading away, the world tree began to burn. And as Odin died, so did Asgard. So Thor was a little upset at this point, a little upset. So he went on a bit of a rampage, as he should. Now, what ended up happening here was because the Ultimate comic goes back and forth, now, back then, before returning to Asgard, Loki had left those Norn stones with a young soldier named Helmet, and also instructions on what to do with them. So he's not like, cool, is that a sapphire? What is this gem? What are these gems? So cut to 60 years later, Thor is on Earth, Helmet opens this portal to the room without doors, and Loki is now free. Thing is, Loki was still a god when he went in. He hasn't gone anywhere, whereas Thor and Balder were reborn as mortal men. So now we got a problem. Number 5, Loki's return. So the god of mischief is back again, and he spent some time under house arrest, and following the failed Chitauri invasion, Loki teamed up with the Liberators in an attempt to take down the Ultimates, which sounds bad enough, but then he also had plans to start World War III. Because, you know, why not? In Ultimates issue 2, Loki used his reality-changing abilities and created the identity of Gunnar Goldman, member of the Norwegian Super Soldier program, and he used Thor's past life as Thorleif in order to make Thor seem like he's going insane. And it worked. Now, he wasn't quite done there, however. See, Loki had also tried to frame Captain America for what happened to Clint's family. He was blending in as a leader, not using his powers, or else Odin would be able to find him, but I'll get into that a little later on. Now, thankfully, the Liberators weren't able to defeat the Ultimates, but Loki still wanted to try after failing this many times. So he attacked the Ultimates again, but the Scarlet Witch and her probability powers summoned Thor, so that didn't happen. Number 4, banished again. Okay, so Thor returns with the hammer this time, Loki is totally screwed, and Thor decides that it's probably best to finish the trickster off. But with Loki and his powers, it's evidently not an easy task, especially when Loki summons an army of Asgardian monsters. It's heated, and then Odin came down to bring the pain himself. Odin too sent some Guardian warriors and removed most of Loki's powers. So those hammer hits from Thor are going to start to leave a mark. So he reverted back to his old ways and he tried to talk himself out of these situations. So he ranted about how he was jealous of Thor, how he wanted to see him finally go down. He even took a jab at us humans for some reason. He's like, look at these fools. They believed all these illusions. Look how stupid they are. They bought it. Meanwhile, I'm like, that's nice. That's really nice. So Thor does a trick of his own and sends Loki right back to Asgard to atone for his sins. But guess what? Number 3, he got out again. Get out of town. Loki? No way. How? Loki somehow got free from Odin and tried to take on Thor yet again, but this time with trolls as backup. He wanted to annoy Thor to a point where he would just go nuts, and then Thor would be the one to lose control and destroy Earth. Like I would do to my older brother all the time. I would bug him, then he'd swear, then I'd tell on him for swearing, and then he'd get grounded. Easy, right? You're welcome. Thing is, Loki ended up taking out Valkyrie, Thor's girlfriend, which never happened in our family, thank God. But this got heated, right? Where Hela had to get involved now. Hela brought Valkyrie back to life, this time as a real Valkyrie, and then she killed Loki. See ya, pal. He went straight to the underworld, straight to hell. But even there, he planned for yet another escape. You gotta respect the hustle, he doesn't quit. Number 2, powers and weaknesses. So we're gonna see many tricks from Loki in this Disney show, and in the Ultimates alone, Loki's abilities are quite impressive. To see a handful of these would just spoil us. He can shuffle space and time, as I mentioned before, but there's a lot to that. So any attacks against Loki are fixable because he can just alter his own godly strength to resist said injuries. He can make you talk to a person that's not even there, make you look absolutely insane, and with multiple copies of Loki, not only will you get a headache from all the monologues, but he's equally as strong as Thor with those numbers. His weaknesses come from his home life, of course. Odin can control quite a bit of this chaos. So if Loki uses all of his power, full capacity, Odin will be able to find him. It's like yelling really loud. They're like, why is he yelling? Oh, it's Loki. Get over here. During Ultimates 2, Thor mentions that Loki's powers had weakened, and it was unclear why at that point. But later on, comments from Loki implied that Odin was the reason behind this all along. And finally, number 1, his death. It's no surprise Loki escaped from hell afterwards when Asgard came to Earth, and during the attack of the Children of Tomorrow, Loki finally met his fate while battling alongside other Asgardians. But not Thor. See, Thor is now in Valhalla at this point. He got released, but he had to have a child with Hela first, so his hands were full. So Thor was able to see Loki's ghost as well as other Asgardians and his nephew, Modi, and you can find the last of Ultimate Loki in Ultimates Volume 2, Issue 2. Kicking off the list at number 10. Vampire King. If there's one thing we need, it's more Vampire Hulk. I mean, right? That's what you were just thinking of. Also, scariest thing you can imagine, easily. He made his first debut in Ultimate Comics Avengers issue 3, and at first he was actually Nerd Hulk, which we see in the MCU right now. God, I hope he doesn't turn into a vampire. Or maybe I do, I don't know. Now, he was a clone of the Hulk that Captain America could take down, so he was smart, but he couldn't win a physical fight. So the Avengers kinda kicked him out. They're like, great, you're smart, but you can't punch, so beat it, pal. Rude. But that's when the next version of Nerd Hulk came to be. He was bitten by a vampire and took over an entire vampire horde. Now, the solution to a vampire Hulk was easier than we might have thought. Just teleport him into sunlight. And that's exactly what happened in Ultimate Avengers 18. We definitely need this guy to come back, especially now, post-COVID. He'd make a mark. Number 9, the Magician. A magician, the Magician. Who is he? The first Ultimate X-Men character that doesn't actually have a counterpart. So the Magician is OG in the Ultimates. Meet Elliot Boggs. He made his grand entrance in Ultimate X-Men issue 66, created by Robert Kirkman and Tom Rainey. Now, he was always dedicated to protect humanity, which is a great thing in a superhero. We want that. But when his powers came to be, the police thought that Elliot was the cause of his parents' death. Rightfully so. I mean, this guy can warp reality, but he can't even control it. So you don't really want to be around him, but you kind of want to be around him. He was able to create people, which is a pretty amazing ability. Dangerous, but amazing. So he worked with the X-Men for a bit, and then he worked with the Academy of Tomorrow for a bit, and then Nick Fury secretly talked to Xavier in hopes to get the Magician into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. Now, the team attacked Elliot after some drama. They thought it was a threat, so he just created more villains. He just created more instances of Multiple Man, Blob, and Toad from the Brotherhood to attack. And Wolverine finished the kid off with his claws to the chestal plate, and it turns out that was just a manifestation, and Elliot was actually still alive. He just needs to disappear to work on his power. Fair. Where are you now? Is it good? Come back. I don't know. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It's really helpful for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your constant support. Let's get right back into this list. Number 8, a teen mutant. This next one is a one-off. He doesn't have a name, so we're just going to refer to him as Teen Mutant for now. He doesn't last too long. Now, at first, he looks like a regular kid. There's posters on his wall. He's got Wolverine on his wall, which is cool. He reminds me of me a little bit, you know, and the caption says be different. So he took that advice maybe a little bit too far. So he wakes up, he's ready for school, he's looking for breakfast, and his mother is just nowhere to be seen. Only a pile of her clothes remains on the ground. So he calls the cops. Just kidding, he didn't do that. He just went to school after leaving a note. Don't do this, kids. Don't do that at all. On the way there, he sees a collar on the ground, again by itself, just clothing laid on the sidewalk. What's going on? Now, finally, he sees people, so he's not going crazy, which is a relief, but I bet he wishes that he was crazy, because he had this neat ability where people just don't survive being close to him. He hears it from the guy in the poster, Wolverine himself, when he finds him ducking out in a cave. So what happened was, when he hit puberty, this teen, he developed a specific mutation that radiates a series of toxins and acid-like poisons, which wipes out any organic tissue and just turns it into vapor, turns it into mist. The number of the day that he ended up taking out just because he hit puberty was 265, and I thought pimples were bad. Number 7, Silver Searcher. So the name is a little different for Norrin Radd in the Ultimates. He made his first debut in Ultimate Fantastic Four issue 42. He was teleported to Earth after Reed Richards mistook him for a star that he wanted to harness. So he brought him here. Awesome, it wasn't his fault. So naturally the world was also in chaos because of his arrival. But Norrin said that he would summon his master who would make the population of Earth happier than they've ever been. Fresh water for all, free phone plans, taxing the rich? What is this plan, sir? The Searcher's master was Zenla's ruler at the time. Revka Termaloon Edifax Skyros III. Rolls off the tongue nice and easy, cool. Also known as the king without enemies. Let's just go with that. So this king would use mind control, that's the trick here, to get mind control and get these humans to worship them. So after Psycho Man took over the Earth, Silver Searcher rescued Mr. Fantastic and asked him to save the planet. Now the Searcher helped the Fantastic Four afterwards and then continued wandering the depths of space. Now we love to see a betrayal, especially when it's for the good side, you know? Norrin is great, and in the Ultimates he is immortal and he's powerful enough to go against the Phoenix, so yeah, we need more of him. Number 6, Loki. Making his first appearance in the Ultimates 2 issue 1, Loki Odinson was much more powerful here. He has the ability to shuffle time and space, as Thor simply puts it. In the beginning, Loki would fight alongside Thor and Balder. They were the Warriors 3. Now his mother was a prisoner of Odin and asked him to bring her the Norn stones, but while he was stealing them, he took out his brother Balder and of course was banished to Asgard afterwards. Now Loki can literally warp reality in the Ultimates. He can retcon history into anything he wanted to. He could create these events that just never happened, until he was depowered by Odin, of course. Now even after he was depowered, he was still able to put up quite a fight as our normal Loki. Now I want to see more Warriors 3 with them. Like, I would watch a show with just those 3 any day. It's probably gonna come, realistically, at this rate the Marvel's going at. Number 5, Iron Man. Making his first appearance in Ultimate Marvel Team Up issue 4, Ultimate Iron Man has some medical issues as well, but it's much more bizarre this time around. It's not his heart that makes him unique, it's actually his brain. Now he was born a genius, of course, and he was also one of 2 twin boys, the other being Gregory Stark. Now Tony originally wanted to start his own business with his current girlfriend Josie Gardner, but after so much pressure from his father, he decided to join the family business, and Josie ended up leaving Tony because of this. She was like, oh, I thought we had a thing? Okay, see ya. Then 6 months later, Josie tragically passed away in a plane crash. Now the plane crash was orchestrated by Mandarin International, which was a company that used to work with Howard Stark earlier, but cut ties. Drama. So Howard wanted Tony to put all that pain into work for the company, but Tony was like, you know what, I think nanotechnology is where I'm gonna put that energy. So after his father's passing, Tony then had to fully take over the company, but by then he was a troubled celebrity, he was an alcoholic, and things got even harder for Tony when he was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. So he mixed his biotech with armor and he bought himself some time. Now Ultimate Tony Stark's tumor was actually an Infinity Stone growing in his brain, so with the nanotech body and everything, it just made him stronger, so much stronger. So this gave Tony the ability to transfer his consciousness between other machines. He's actually friends with his brain tumor in this world. His name is actually Anthony. It's a little boy. It's like a separate living hallucination boy. Totally normal. Number 4, Colossus. Making his first appearance in the 1610 universe with Ultimate X-Men issue 1, Peter Rasputin aka Colossus was discovered during the Cold War. He was attacked by Anatol Spichkin, but when it was confirmed that Peter was indeed a mutant, a deal was made instead. Anatol would keep his secret and he was so ready to give Peter a job, but down the road, if he ever needed one, he had a job for him down the road. Of course, he was a giant guy made of metal. He's like, hey, I got some for you to do, trust me. Roofing, stapling, some hammering, we can find you some things. Peter's father, like most fathers in these comics, was not a pleasant man, so Peter thought, you know what, I could use some of that help now, let's go. And then he went back to Anatol because the thing is, Ultimate Colossus had thick skin, literally he was made of steel, but he wasn't strong enough where it really made a huge difference. I mean, sure, drywall is easier to punch through, but it was heavy. Like, imagine wearing a skin suit of metal. The Tin Man probably had insane calves, but it wasn't until Anatol introduced Peter to this drug called Banshee, and that's where he got the strength behind those metal mitts. So now Colossus, on narcotics, was taking on these jobs, these super strong tourist gigs, and at the age of 19, Peter was picked up from Big Boris, a Russian mafia boss, and then he worked with him for 10 years. So he just joined the mafia for 10 years from 19 to 29. You know, the usual the thing you do after you're 19. He kept his powers a secret mostly for those around him, and then one day during a botched arm deal, Peter and his team were shot at. Peter survived because of his thick skin, and his mutant ability was also exposed in a much greater way. He was kind of screwed until Jean Grey found him and then offered him a spot with the X-Men. That's actually where you got the codename Colossus. Now this version is unreal. He's close with Wolverine as they both share, horrible backgrounds. They would walk the streets at night just trying to solve these dark cases, looking for trouble. Imagine these two bumping into you. No chance. In Ultimate War, he took on Thor and Iron Man at the same time for 10 minutes. So, how wild is that? Number 3, Ultimate Red Skull. Making his debut in the Ultimate Comics Avengers 1 back in 2009, Ultimate Red Skull is, I know, a villain, but he wasn't always that way. He's a lot different than the Red Skull that we know from our main continuity. He's actually the son of Steve Rogers in this universe and Gail Richards. They even hid him and trained him to become the next Captain America. The Ultimates are wild. This is the dream scenario. But he always feared that he would never live up to his father's expectations. Now, it's not like he was raised in a bad household. It was kind of the opposite. He was raised to become a superhero. He was raised to fill some rather big boots. He was raised to become the next Captain America after he was declared dead in Iceland. So he kind of had the dream job, and he was more powerful than Steve Rogers as well. So what happened? So when we're talking about comebacks, I really think Ultimate Red Skull could have been a treat. Now, he was eventually in charge of the military that he grew up with. He figured out now that he was a leader, and he used it against them. His personality as well was pretty easygoing, so it wasn't hard to convince anybody what he was doing. But again, he had this mental wall where he could never live up to Father Rogers. So at age 17, he escaped and took out every doctor and soldier on that team. He just wiped everybody out. So evil. And then he used a kitchen knife to really complete the whole Red Skull look. A nice do-it-yourself makeover. Nice and haunting. So he had all the tools to be great, but that pressure of Steve Rogers took him down the wrong path. Interesting. Number 2, Magneto. He made his first appearance in Ultimate X-Men issue 1. Eric Lehnsherr was born to 2 Canadian agents of Weapon X. Now he got his abilities and mastered magnetism at a young age, and his father didn't respond well to that. He was intoxicated most of the time, and he attacked Eric one day. Not an ideal living situation for a child. Now he tried to shoot Eric once, but those powers naturally came out, and then Eric pushed the bullet right back. So Eric had to spend his teen years with that guilt weighing down on him. Now eventually he was disgusted with Weapon X, the whole idea of finding a cure for the mutant gene through means of. So he used these abilities, freed Mutant X, Wolverine, who I talked about in part 1 of this list, which you for sure watched. And then Eric married a human woman named Isabel, but he left her once he met Charles Xavier. They didn't fall in love. He was fascinated. This is the first adult mutant that he's ever met, and they share the same ideologies on them. So Eric grabbed these mutant kids from a previous lover and then denied ever loving a human woman. Rough. The Brotherhood relocated to the Savage Land a few years later, and then Eric started referring to the mutants as an army, which is bad news. He was changing, as were his views on this whole mutant operation. He even started going by the name Magneto, totally abandoned his human name, and then Xavier was no longer on board. I mean, this is Supervillain 101. Anybody can see a villain in the making, especially if you can read minds. That sure does help. So Magneto made a helmet that prevented that from ever happening. This helmet prevented psi intrusion into his mind, and it also looked cool. So when Charles took a few loyal followers and made a run for it, Magneto was pretty upset and broke Charles' spine, leaving him in the wheelchair. And finally, number 1, we have Miles Morales. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Fallout issue 4, just a couple months before the death of Peter Parker. Now Norman Osborn was arrested and revealed as the Green Goblin, and then a young thief broke into that empty Osborn industry, and then that's where a genetically enhanced spider found its way into the thief's backpack. Now while Miles Morales was visiting his Uncle Aaron, that spider just happened to crawl out of Uncle Aaron's bag, and then it bit Miles Morales. He of course got these amazing abilities, the Spider-Man abilities, but on top of that he could also turn invisible, which is a pretty sweet gig. That plus stun blast makes Miles pretty hard to take down. Now the thing is, what makes him unique is at first Miles didn't really want to be a hero. He wanted to leave that up to the real Spider-Man until his untimely departure, saving his family from Osborn. So Miles got to the scene, but it was too late and too ahead of him. So he felt guilt after this for not being able to save Peter, so he suited up and joined the battle. His first villain was against Kangaroo, and he took him on wearing a Spider-Man Halloween costume, which is a great look. I honestly love Miles. I'm so happy he's in a bigger part of the Spider-Verse that we're currently in, and I'm betting that we meet live-action Miles Morales in the next Spider-Man movie. I think that's the only thing they've managed to keep a secret about that film. I'm calling it now.
Number 10, Black Widow. The Avengers in the Ultimate Universe are different from their main continuity counterparts, as while the Avengers in 616 are a team of bona fide heroes brought together by massive and often global threats, the Avengers of Earth 1610 were brought together by Nick Fury and are often a team composed of former villains and kinda anti-heroes, people less marketable generally than 1610's Ultimates, which are like the equivalent to the 616's Avengers. Instead, the Avengers from 1610 end up becoming more comparable to DC's Suicide Squad, a team of reluctant participants who are forced to work together to complete missions for S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury. Monica Chang, however, was not one of the more criminal-based members of the team, and instead was the new Black Widow. She was given the mantle of Black Widow after the death of Natasha, who it turned out was a traitor to S.H.I.E.L.D., the Ultimates, and the USA. Monica was with the Avengers team from day one, joining them on their first mission to apprehend Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, and locate and put a stop to the Red Skull. Monica doesn't have any superpowers, but is a trained agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. She is a skilled spy, combatant, and is experienced with various types of firearms, though typically is known for wielding 2 pistols. While wearing her Stark suit, she also possessed enhanced strength and speed. However, she was still a normal human, and as such was still able to be killed fairly easily when she went up against the immortal Green Goblin. Poor Monica though, I feel like that whole thing kinda did her dirty because, you know, she actually survived for a long time prior to that. So it was really weird that she was like, I'm gonna go into this fight and I'm gonna be super unprepared. Hey, then you die. That's what happens. Monica should know that. Number 9. The Punisher. The Punisher in the reality of Earth 1610 was a member of both Nick Fury's Howling Commandos, who fought against the Maker's Dark Ultimates, and a member of Fury's Avengers. The Punisher's powers are basically the same as his Earth 616 counterpart. In other words, he doesn't really have any superpowers. He's mostly just a man who is really skilled in his use of various firearms. He was a trained police officer with the NYPD, so it was lots of tactical training and experience. The first time he joined the Avengers, it was to protect the Vice President against Ghost Rider, but the spirit of vengeance convinced Frank to stand down, and even assist him in the end, also helping him to escape. The Punisher would also escape S.H.I.E.L.D. custody following the mission, but would later be recruited once more by Fury after he ended up in prison. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more Ultimate lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, check out our Ultimate Marvel Universe playlist for more videos like this. Number 8. Red Wasp. Red Wasp initially went by the name of Swarm and was a member of the antagonistic Liberators team. She was believed to have been killed in the fight between the Liberators and the Ultimates by the Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, who became giant and stepped on Swarm. However, Petra Laskov managed to survive, saved by S.H.I.E.L.D. and put into rehabilitation by them. Rehabilitation. She was made to work for them and join up with their Avengers team. They even placed an obedience chip within her to make sure that she followed orders. Rehabilitation. During her time with S.H.I.E.L.D., Petra would take up the mantle Red Wasp. She can shrink herself down to the size of an insect and can control large swarms of insects as well. However, because of her insect-like abilities, she can also be defeated using insect repellent. So, pretty cool powers, but with a pretty big weakness. Number 7. Blade. Blade was recruited to the Avengers by Nick Fury, who promised to deliver him Deacon Frost in exchange for his service. Frost is the man responsible for killing Blade's mother and turning him into the creature that he is, in case you didn't know that. Blade helped to apprehend Tyrone Cash after S.H.I.E.L.D. learned he was responsible for selling off their super soldiers on the black market. Blade incapacitated Cash through hypnosis. Ooh, supernatural powers. However, despite him being part vampire, Blade is not as tough as you'd expect, especially in comparison to the tough version of the character we know from the Earth 616. Iron Man found that out when he basically crushed the poor anti-hero. Blade's time serving as part of the Ultimate Avengers may have also helped to get him on the main continuity Avengers team of Earth 616 in the future. I also gotta say, I really love Blade as an addition to the 616 Avengers. I don't know if everybody else is super enjoying that, but I'm really enjoying that. Are you enjoying that? I hope you are. Number 6. Hawkeye. But wait a minute, isn't Hawkeye a member of the Ultimates? Well, yes, he has been that too, but hey, he can do both. Hawkeye, despite being more of a bona fide hero, bona fide hero, still had a pretty shady past, which was what made him a great candidate for the Avengers team. Nick Fury invited him to join originally when they went on the hunt for Red Skull, and Barton agreed. In fact, I believe Hawkeye actually helped to bring this team together as well. The Avengers team for him was like a Black Ops group willing to do the dirty work that the Ultimates couldn't be seen getting involved in. Often this meant the villains they went after usually ended up dead. Such was the case with Red Skull in the end. Hawkeye might just seem like a guy with a bow, and well, he is. But he is really good with that bow. He has enhanced vision, which allows him to see much farther and clearer than your average human, and he is an extremely skilled fighter, pilot, and spy. So, you know. Also, he's deadly with fingernails, so watch yourself if you're just facing him as he is. If he's got fingernails, he's got weapons. Number 5. War Machine. War Machine is James Rhodes, who became a close friend to Iron Man and ended up being gifted a suit of armor from Tony to use in his own heroic adventures. He would end up being recruited and serve on the revived Avengers project as a member of the team during their first mission, where they attempted to defeat and capture Red Skull. Rhodey happened to be armed with a nuke to use against the Red Skull as part of a last resort plan, if needed. But the Red Skull had overheard about this plan and said nuke, and so managed to disable it easily using the Cosmic Cube. Honestly, if the Red Skull didn't have the Cosmic Cube though at this time, my money would have definitely been on War Machine in this fight, because War Machine I think is pretty powerful. War Machine would also for a time gain temporary Hulk-like powers after being given some of Tyrone Cash's Hulk serum. Number 4. Nerd Hulk. While Nerd Hulk is a very powerful character in terms of his abilities being on the same level of power as Bruce Banner's Hulk from Earth 1610, he tends to end up being not so powerful in actuality when battling other people. This is because he has a tendency to hold back though. Nerd Hulk is a clone that Gregory Stark, Tony Stark's brother, created. Nerd Hulk prefers to try and resolve conflicts using logic as opposed to violence, and it is the marriage of his intellect and strength combined that holds him back from being as deadly as he could be. Still, the potential is there, and he does have access to the same amount of strength and ferocity as Banner if he'd only feel inclined to use it. Nerd Hulk was a member of the Avengers team when they were first resurrected and went after Red Skull. He would also later attempt to join the Ultimates, but he was denied membership. Sad. Poor Nerd Hulk. I love him with his little glasses. Number 3. Gregory Stark. Gregory Stark is like the evil brother of Tony Stark. He is the more immoral of the two when it comes to technology, but is more put together overall in comparison to his brother. Much less of a mess, if you will. This obviously made him a valuable asset to S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury, and so he ended up on the Avengers team. However, Gregory was also super smart, and was using his time working with S.H.I.E.L.D. to put certain plans into action that would allow him to take over control and eventually kind of rule the world, sort of. After Fury seemingly went rogue and Carol Danvers was also removed from the chessboard, Gregory was made the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and attempted to use his influence and nanite tech to cause chaos and war to erupt in other nations. Fortunately, he would be defeated by his brother Tony, who disabled his nanites with an EMP, allowing Thor to take him down. Still, for a time, Gregory was a pretty valuable member of the Avengers team, and later a formidable villain to them and to the Ultimates. And for that, he gets some bonus points. That's what I say. Gold Star Gregory Stark. That's what I call him. For evilness, I guess. Number 2. Tyrone Cash. Tyrone Cash was a fairly powerful version of the Hulk, and actually was the first Hulk to exist in the Ultimate Universe. He created the Hulk serum before his protege Bruce Banner was able to, and decided to use it on himself. This gave him massive strength, and he took the name Tyrone Cash, and decided to become a criminal, using his brilliant intellect to avoid capture for longer than a decade. Previously, he'd been known as the Scientist and as Banner's mentor, Professor Leonard Williams. Eventually, Cash was apprehended and forced to join the Avengers team, and after S.H.I.E.L.D. learned that he'd betrayed them, Fury had him executed. So of course, who's the most powerful? Who could it be? Number 1. Nick Fury. When it comes to the Avengers team, Nick Fury is like the Amanda Waller of it all, in comparison to the Ultimate Avengers DC counterpart, which would likely be the Suicide Squad. Nick Fury was the one to resurrect Project Avengers, and while he claimed claimed this was done to hunt down the Red Skull, Captain America's villainous son in this reality, it is actually believed that Fury had orchestrated Red Skull's return in order to get his job back as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and resurrect the old abandoned Avengers project. That's just so Nick Fury, I'm just saying. Nick Fury holds a lot of power not just as a master spy who often deals in secrets, but also because he was exposed to the super soldier serum and has influence over the rest of the Avengers team as their overall leader and organizer. He's just got a lot of power. He's also got a million plans, so if you're like, oh, I know how I'll beat Nick Fury, he probably already has a plan for if you try to do that to him. That's how good he is.
Number 10, Hawkeye. Ultimate Hawkeye first appeared in Ultimate issue 7, and he doesn't mind going for the kill this time around. He was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who wasn't as fancy when it came to arrows, he's just more military this time around. It's actually pretty dark at times. He became a super soldier once briefly when the Avengers were put on the USS Jimmy Carter. They got captured, and then Hawkeye and a few others ingested super soldier serum, and then they rescued Nick Fury. Hawkeye is a pretty sweet agent. He's badass, he gets it done. But his family life and dynamic with Black Widow this time around is much different than most would think. When a team of mercenaries broke into Clint's house early on, they took out his wife and kids, which is awful. But it gets even worse when you find out that Black Widow was the leader of said mercenary team. And then Hawkeye gets even in a pretty gruesome way. 3 arrows, perfectly placed. Gory. Pretty gory, very gory. Number 9, Nick Fury. When he entered the Ultimate and Marvel Team Up issue 5, Nick Fury would soon take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And his first plan was to bring back the Super Soldier program, which actually resulted in the creation of Ultimate Captain America and Ultimate Hulk, etc. His origins are pretty unique. I mean, he fought for the US in World War II, and tragically he was taken by force to be the next test subject for Project Rebirth. When he was injected with this new serum, it gave him super strength, and in turn, he freed himself and other prisoners and busted out of there. So now he's got quite the power behind those punches, and Ultimate Nick Fury is way cooler than our 616 Nick Fury because he was designed to look like Samuel L. Jackson, so it's really no contest. And before we continue on with this list of ultimate heroes, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help our channel out a lot. I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's go right back into this list. Thank you so much. Number 8, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner made his Ultimate debut in Ultimate X-Men issue 7. Now his origins here had him growing up in the Weapon X program, and he was trained to become an assassin from the start. He had a pretty dark upbringing, and in turn he would have these bad pockets with the X-Men. Like Warren and Dazzler were a couple, but Kurt also liked Dazzler, so he kidnapped her? Okay. And the team was like, hey, so we're gonna put you in a coma now because that's not cool. We can't really do that. And then he came back and he apologized. The dust was settled, no hard feelings. Okay, sure. He joined Colossus' X-Men team with Dazzler and Angel, by the way, so it was definitely fine. Kurt wasn't all bad. He was actually kind of funny, I mean, as a character, because sometimes he would use the Danger Room with Angel to reenact Pirates of the Caribbean instead of, fighting bad guys. So already this version is my kind of guy. I mean, minus the kidnapping part, of course. Him and Angel were tight because they couldn't hide their mutations, so they ended up being best of friends. So they fought pirates together, chased the same girls, they're living the mutant dream in a way. Not bad. Sadly, Kurt was killed by Magneto's ultimatum wave, and it got a lot of other X-Men killed as well. So it's dark, it's nice, and then it's dark. That's the Ultimates. Number 7, the Hulk. First appearing in Ultimate Marvel Team Up issue 2, he's still big, he's still angry, but this time around he is gray. Okay. Now before this, however, Bruce Banner wanted to be just like Captain America, back before he was the Hulk, back before he was big and strong. So at Cambridge University, he was committed to duplicating the super soldier serum with helps of Nick Fury's super soldier blood. So he used it on himself, and honestly, already I'm a fan of Bruce Banner more. I mean, the Hulk hasn't even been created yet, and then Nick Fury, the first super soldier, gathered the best genetic engineers to recreate the serum, and Bruce was luckily amongst them. So Bruce actually thought that he figured this thing out, but again, he wanted to be like Cap and he wanted to stay quiet, so he tested this new serum out on himself, and then he ended up becoming Ultimate Hulk. Later on, Bruce decided to make even more serum, so he mixed super soldier serum again with this new Hulk serum, smashed them together, injected himself, so now super soldier Nick Fury actually made Banner the Hulk in this timeline. That's a cool sentence right there. Number 6, Deadpool. Meet Wade E. Wilson. He had a pretty rough go in the Ultimates, as do most of them. I'd say more intense than his 616 counterpart, because in Ultimate Spider-Man, Wilson gets hired by the Ganosian government, but of course in Deadpool's spirit, he gets hired to double down and hunt these mutants, but it's also a TV event. It's fun. And then when Deadpool is going up against Spider-Man, he actually gets unmasked. And his appearance is even more shocking in this reality. Even the host has to apologize to the viewers at home because his mask, I mean, to begin with, wasn't even really a mask. It's translucent, so not really the best. And then Spider-Man even adds insult to injury, saying that his face smells like a KFC dumpster on a hot day. So if anybody needs redemption, it's definitely Wade Wilson from the Ultimates. Number 5, Juggernaut. The first time we see him, it's very clear that he's more powerful. Something is up with this X-Men. He looked like a future version of the Juggernaut. It was pretty intimidating. Now he looks like an evil stripper from the future, which is, honestly, I like it. It's cool. He was a genius in this universe as well. I mean, literally, the guy was super smart. He grew up in the same trailer park as Rogue, and he still considered himself trailer trash, although he was one of the smartest people alive. Guys, never doubt yourself. Things took a turn when he was taken by Weapon X and forced to be this living weapon of mass destruction. Then following the orders of Colonel John Wraith, he was part of their strike force that took out the X-Men, or even worse, forced the X-Men into Weapon X, which we heard plenty of early on in this list. He walked tall and mighty until he got taken out in the dumbest way possible. Like the Juggernaut, this makes me upset. He for sure needs a redemption, that's all I'm saying. Even when he's fighting Rogue later on, he still wants them to be happy and in love. He still wants that dream, so he's still a good guy deep down. And then Ultimate X-Men issue 99, in the middle of a fight, he gets taken down because of a poisonous dart. A dart. Yeah, just one of those. That's it. The Juggernaut got taken out by a dart. It went right through his visor gap. I mean, amazing aim, but come on. This is the same guy that dropped a building on Gambit. Number 4, Mr. Fantastic. Reed Richards needs a redemption on screen before anything else. I mean, the last Fantastic Four movie, I mean, if you haven't watched it, honestly, don't. Marvel's redoing them soon. You might as well just wait it out. In the Ultimate version, it was dark, and he was younger, and honestly, he was cooler. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Fantastic Four issue 1, and even at the start of Ultimatum, when that big wave hit, Sue bites the bullet, and he didn't waste any time. He's not happy. He immediately blames Namor, and by blaming, I mean he knocks him out first and then asks questions later. Okay, Reed, chill. Eventually, he becomes a villain in this universe, referring to himself as the Maker, and caused some trouble in the 616 universe as well, after his universe was destroyed. Now, this is the Mr. Fantastic that we need. This guy gets the job done. He's scary. Number 3, Wolverine. Making his first appearance in Ultimate X-Men issue 1, he didn't remember his past, and he thinks that he was once married. He has a ring, and he thinks Sabretooth killed his family. It's all a blur. Stressful. No thanks to Weapon X. Now, Ultimate James Howlett is actually the first mutant, and it turns out that this time around, you can kill Wolverine. You just have to rip his bones out that happen to have adamantium built into it. That ought to do it. Also, so painful. This all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event, and Wolverine doesn't even have a chance to scream. The adamantium that bonded to his bones erupted outward like water bursting through a dam. There's a nice picture for you. And he's still breathing when this happens. I mean, if this isn't one of the worst things to go through, I don't know what is. Number 2, Thor. Making his first entry in the Ultimates with issue 4, Thor Odinson actually looks a lot like our current MCU Thor, and I think he might have more in common than we think. For starters, the Ultimate Thor needs a magic belt to have powers, and in Spider-Man Homecoming, Happy mentions Thor's magic belt and all the stuff that they're packing up on Moving Day. So Thor just might need this come Love and Thunder, but in the comics, Loki was convincing everybody that Thor is just an insane dude with a magic belt. And they kind of bought it. What happens was he wasn't worthy yet, so he got his ass kicked, and then finally in Ultimates 2, issue 12, he gets his powers back. But the fact that this Thor went through all that to begin with, so sad. Definitely so sad. Number 1, Quicksilver. Okay, yeah, he's in love with his sister in the Ultimates, and it's weird, and it's gross. Yeah, sure. But this Quicksilver otherwise was far more superior. He was faster in the Ultimate Universe, he was supersonic when it comes to speeds. He almost reached the speed of light at one point, like, come on, dude. And as long as he's still alive, he can always re-heal himself. In Ultimate Wolverine issue 3, Pietro grabs Logan and runs with him. He was actually trying to tear the flesh off him, and if it was anybody else but Wolverine, it probably would have worked. And in Ultimate Comics 29, he heals himself using his super fast metabolism, and he uses his super speed to study Reed Richards' notes. He says he's not smart, but he is fast, so he ran the math nearly 100,000 times. That's insane. Quicksilver needs a comeback for sure, more so on screen than I think any superhero right now. Hashtag Ralph Boner.